Hi everyone. Today we're gonna. Sorry. My name is Erin Wojno from Southwest Middle School. Today we're going to be talking about Australia's government and economics and how that impacts their people. So let's get started. So the standard that we're going to be covering is SS6 CG4. We're going to be explaining the forms of citizen participation in the government. So you're going to see how the citizens participate, how they get their voice across in the government of Australia. So let's look over some of those key vocabulary words first. So we have an autocracy, which one person controls everything in the government. The citizens have no say. So there's one leader, there's one person that makes all the decisions. That person may have a cabinet or a group of advisors that help them make the decisions, but overall that one person controls everything. The citizens don't get a vote, they don't get a say in what goes on. Then there's a presidential democracy. This country has a president as their leader, and they have a Congress. The citizens are able to vote for representatives, and they vote on different laws of the country. So the United States has a presidential democracy. And then the last one is a parliamentary democracy. This country has a prime minister as their leader, and they have a parliament. And the citizens, they do have a voice. They get to vote on their representatives in the parliament. And then the parliament votes on the prime minister. So it's a little different than the presidential democracy because we vote on the president directly, while in the parliament, they vote on the parliament representatives, and then the parliament votes for the prime minister. So the ways in which government systems distribute power is the relationship between the central government, the head government, the big government, and then the smaller governmental divisions, so the states, the cities, the counties. It's a different relationship. So those states and cities may have certain rights that they're able to decide for the people that live there, but then there's also the central government that may decide everything for the whole. So let's go to an autocracy. This power is held by one central authority, so what we just went over. That central authority has all the power. Remember, those people have no say. They are not able to vote. Maybe if they are able to vote, there's only one person on the ballot. So not really getting that experience of being able to be free and vote for the person that you want. So let's look at this on the screen. The ways that government distributes their power, and this is an autocracy. So you can see the big center circle is the central authority, the main power. And you see that there's 4 arrows going to the state authorities, which are smaller bubbles. You don't see that anything is coming into the central authority. Nobody is giving their input into the central authority. Everything is going out. So that's just showing that central authority has all the power. They're making all the decisions. They're doing all of the laws, all of the policies, all the regulations for the country. The states, the cities, the counties, they are not able to have their input. So in Australia, they do have a parliamentary democracy. They have a prime minister. They have a parliament. The people are able to vote on the parliament representatives. They are able to vote on certain laws that the country wants to pass. They vote on those representatives to represent them. They vote on the best person that they think is going to make the decisions that they want, or a person that's going to listen to them when they have a problem, when they have an issue, when they want something to pass. So voting in Australia is a little bit different. The Australian citizens are required to vote. It is mandatory. They have to. If they do not vote, they could be fined, like a little fee that they have to pay for not voting. Australia saw a huge downfall in their voting members in the early 1960s, so they made voting mandatory for all. They wanted people to have their voice. They wanted those people to vote, so they made it mandatory. In the United States, it is not mandatory. We are not made to vote. Most people do because they want their voice heard, but we don't get fined if we don't. So let's look at this chart that's on the screen, citizenship participation. So in an autocratic government, the government power is very, very high. The arrow is almost all the way up, very, very high. The citizen participation is little to none. They don't get to vote, they don't get a say, they don't get any of those things. So the arrows are opposite. But if you look at the democratic government, you'll see that the government power is high, but the citizen participation is also high. So the government may regulate certain safety protocols or health hazards, things like that. But the citizens also get that vote, they get that say, they can get their point across without it being a bad thing. Okay, so let's just do a little pop quiz. This is how this is going to work. I'm going to read the 3 questions. I'll give you 5 seconds after each question to call out your answer, say what your answer is, think about your answer, and then I'll tell you what the right answer is. So for number 1, what is the government system where all decisions are made by one person? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That is an autocratic government or an autocracy. So, number 2, what type of government does Australia have? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. If you said a parliamentary democracy, you are correct. They have the prime minister, they have the parliament. And then number 3, true or false? Citizen participation is low in Australia. So, think about that. Parliamentary democracy, is their citizen participation low or is it high? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That statement is false. Citizen participation in Australia is high. They have a democracy. The people are able to vote and they do have a voice. Okay. So let's move on to the economics part of this lesson. So we'll be covering 3 different things in this next piece of the lesson. So we're going to be analyzing different economic systems. We're going to be talking about the 3 main economic systems. And then we're going to talk about how voluntary trade benefits those buyers and sellers in Australia. And then we're also going to talk about the factors that influence economic growth and examine their presence and absence. So how the influence of different factors, different productive resources grow that economy. Okay, so before we can discuss the economic systems or really anything else in economics, we need to review basic concepts. So the first one would be, what is economics? So we have the definition here. The economics is the choices we make about how to use limited resources to produce goods and services that meet our needs and wants. So it's the choices that the people make on how to use those resources that we have in the country, whether they be limited or if we have an abundance of them, to produce those goods, those services that meet the needs of the people or the wants of the people. So there are 3 main economic systems in the world. There's command, market, and traditional. All 3 are very different. So let's look at command first. In a command economy, the government makes all the economic decisions. They own most of the property in the country. So that sounds like a autocratic government. This is sometimes called communism or referred to as communism. Example of the countries with this would be North Korea. North Korea is a very command economy. And then Cuba. Cuba is more on the getting out of the command economy. They are trying to transition into more of a market or mixed economy, which we'll learn about in a second. but it's very difficult to transition out of different economies because it takes a lot of money and a lot of resources and power, and Cuba just isn't at that point yet, but they are trying to move out of it. This system has not been very successful. More and more of those countries are abandoning it. That's why there's not that many that have a command economy. Okay, so if you look at this picture, you'll see the Korean peninsula. So you have North Korea at the top and South Korea at the bottom. And you'll see that South Korea is lit up, full of lights. It seems like they're just having a good time over there. South Korea is more of a market economy. So their people have more choice. They're able to do what they want. They're able to do certain things that the North Korean people are not. If you look at North Korea, it's dark. There's only that one little lit up spot, and that would be the capital of North Korea. North Korea actually has a curfew. The lights have to be off at a certain time. The people don't have a choice with that. You see that the whole country is dark. They do not have that choice. Where in South Korea, everything's lit up. Some places are dark, but most of them are lit up. So let's move on to a market economy. In a market economy, the buyers and sellers have that power to decide certain things in the economy. They decide prices, they decide what they're going to sell, how they're going to sell it, stuff like that. One of the strengths of this economy would be that people start their own business very, very easily in a market economy. They're able to have more choice with that. They're able to get the things that they need to start those businesses. A weakness would have to be the desire for money in this economy. It may lead to certain poor decisions, poor quality goods and services. So the business owners have to take the risk of losing money. They have to take that risk before they can make the money that they want. So a traditional economy, this is an economy where the decisions are based on customs and beliefs. So the people will make what they always made. They'll do what they have always done. So if your parent was a fisherman, you're going to be a fisherman. If your parent was a basket weaver, you're going to be a basket weaver. It all goes down the line. It's a traditional system. Nothing really changes. They believe in those traditions. They believe that it gets them to where they are. Those exchanges of goods, it's done through bartering, and bartering is trading without using money. So they'll trade grain for maybe a weapon or something that they can't make themselves. So they'll trade certain things that they are good at making for things that they can't really get access to. Traditional economies are often agriculturally based, which means they mostly do farming or grazing of animals, stuff like that. So now let's move on to that fourth economic system that isn't part of the three first economic systems. So this is a mixed economy. This is market plus command, and that equals a mixed economy. So it's a good mixture of both of those. So if you look at all the countries in the world, there are no pure command or market economies aside from North Korea. They are pure command. To some degree, all of those modern economies are mixed of both systems. So the government may regulate certain things like safety and health hazards, but the citizens also have that power to have the businesses, buyers and sellers have certain rights that they have. So most democratic countries fall under this category. So if you look at the line that's on the screen, it has mixed economies in the center and then pure and command off to the side. So Cuba would be closer to the command side. It wouldn't be all the way command, but it would be closer to the command side, while the United States would be closer to the market side because we have more freedoms than some of the other countries. So we would be more on the market side. So let's look at our productive resources. Every country has these set of productive resources in their economy that they can invest in and grow their economy or raise their GDP. So the GDP is the gross domestic product, and this is just the value of those finished goods and services that the buyers are, or that the sellers are making. And it's all of those things put together within that one country during a set period of time. And it's usually within a year that we figure out the GDP of countries. So the four productive resources are capital goods, human capital, natural resources, and entrepreneurship or entrepreneur. So let's break those down a little further. So let's look at human capital. The human capital are those actual labor, is the actual labor force. The people working in the factories, in the stores, in those businesses, they're the actual people doing the work. So some examples would be teachers, construction workers, cashiers, waiters, doctors, all of those people that are actually performing the service or making the good. And then we have natural resources. These are things that are found in nature that help make that good or service. So examples would be water, trees, dirt, minerals, all those things that you can just find right outside. So the capital resources, these are the tools that the human resources, the labor force, the people actually use to get the job done. They help the labor force get it done. It makes it easier, gets the job done faster. So those examples would be a cash register, any type of machinery or factory machines, construction machines, anything that's going to help that labor force make the product more efficiently. And then you have the entrepreneurship or an entrepreneur. And this is someone who has an idea for the good or service and actually takes the risk to produce it. So they have a good idea. They want to create this good or service, so they take that risk. They put the money into it in hopes that they're going to get money out of it. So examples of this would be Bill Gates, who created Microsoft, or Steve Jobs, who created Apple. So how to invest in those human capital and those capital resources? It's super, super important that you invest in those two things. It makes your economy better. So to invest in that human capital, you would give the workers more training, more education to help build their skills and their knowledge about what they're doing. So you'll give them more training to help them work on that machine or help them find ways to make those products or that service more efficiently so they can make more money. And then to invest in those capital resources, you would invest money into those machines, those factories, those tools, giving those people new tools, better machinery, faster working machinery, so the human capital can get the job done quicker and more efficiently, so they can make it quicker, but it's also made right. So let's move on to literacy rate. Literacy rate is the number of people in the country over the age of 15 who can read and write. So literacy rate is super important in a country. Developing a high literacy rate can be hard for certain countries that do not have the resources to give the people education. So a lot of those countries that have a lot of poverty, it's very hard for them to make that jump, make that leap, because there's no source of them to get the education that they need. A lot of countries that have very low poverty usually have a high literacy rate because they are able to educate their people very easily. So the standard of living is the degree of wealth and material comfort available to a person or a community. So it's the availability of a person to get things that they want, those luxury items that they don't really need. That's what the standard of living is. It's their ability to have that available to them. You can improve your standard of living by improving your country's literacy rate. So literacy rate and standard of living kind of go hand in hand. If you have a low literacy rate, you're most likely going to have a low standard of living. That doesn't mean that everybody in the country has a low standard of living. It just means that Majority of them have a low standard of living. If your country has a high literacy rate, then it's more likely to have a high standard of living. Okay, so if you can read and write, you can improve your work skills and end up getting a better job, which can make you more money, which could put you up that ladder to have a higher standard of living. So like I just said, if a country has a low literacy rate, they are more likely to have that low standard of living. And then if you have a high literacy rate, you're more likely to have a high standard of living. So let's take a little brain break. We covered a lot of information. So let's take about 20 seconds to stretch, get up, move, or just relax. Take in what you just learned, think about it, and let it sink into your head. And then we'll get back in about 20 seconds. Okay. So let's move on. So let's talk about trade. Trade is something that's very important in countries. You get a lot of the materials that you don't have access to in your country by trading. So there are some key things to know when trading among yourself or other countries. So some of those key words we're going to be talking about is specialization, trade barriers, and currency exchange. You need all three of those in order to trade efficiently. So countries trade because no country has all the resources it needs to provide for its people. So all the countries have different resources. You may have an abundance of trees, while another country doesn't really have that many trees. They need the lumber, they need the trees for paper, they need it for all kinds of things, but they don't have access to it. So they may trade something that they have a lot of for the things that they don't. So voluntary trade. Voluntary trade happens when both the countries expect to gain from the trade. So they're not forced to trade with anybody. It's all voluntary. If they need something that the other country has, they're going to voluntarily trade something that they have that the other country does not. So the buyer of the country receives the goods and the seller of the country gets the money or whatever other product they may need. So currency exchange. Exchange rates provide a procedure for determining the value of one country's terms in one country's currency in terms of another country's currency. So most countries in the world have their own set of money. Other countries' money is not necessarily worth the same in another country, so you have to know the exchange rate for certain types of money. So, for example, $1 US is equal to 24 Mexican pesos. So if you went to Mexico and gave them $1, they would give you back 24 Mexican pesos. It's different for each country. Not every country is the same. For Australia, $1 US is equal to $1.50 in Australian dollars. So it's not the same in every country. You have to know that exchange rate if you're making those trades. Specialization. This occurs when one country can produce a good or service at a lower cost than the other country. So they specialize in that product or that service. They know how to make it efficiently, they know how to make it quickly, they know how to make it in the best quality possible. So this usually encourages trade between countries because a country can get what they want or what they need at the lowest cost. Because if somebody specializes in it, they know how to make that at the lowest possible cost. So the person buying that item or service knows that they're getting that item at the best possible price. So an example of this would be oil in the Middle East. The Middle East produces a lot of oil. They know how to extract that oil without losing a whole lot of money, without losing a whole lot of oil. They know how to do it. They've been doing it for a long time. So a lot of countries trade or buy that oil from them. The Middle East is not the best at making cars, so they don't do that. They sell their oil for the cars that they want, or they trade the oil for the cars that they want. So they know that they specialize in oil, and they know that they can get something that they don't specialize in by trading it. So let's look at those trade barriers. There are 3. Trade barriers are something that a country puts in place to restrict trade between certain countries. So a lot of times countries do this because they want to produce their own goods and services, so they don't want their people buying outside sources. So these types of trade barriers are a tariff, a quota, and an embargo. So a tariff are taxes that are placed on those imported goods, those goods that are brought into the country. And they cause the consumer or the buyer to pay a higher price for that imported item, the item that's brought in. And it increases that demand for the lower priced item that is produced domestically, that is produced inside that country. So a quota is a limit on the amount of a good that can be imported into the country. So only a certain number of that product can be brought in. This can cause a lot of shortages that cause those prices to rise. The supply and the demand kind of make that a little bit harder to produce. And then the last one is an embargo. This bans trade with another country. And embargoes are usually put in place when there's a war between countries or a disagreement or something that one country doesn't like that the other country did. So usually an embargo is placed on them to try to hurt that other country. So the 3 trade barriers, tariff, quota, embargo. It's very easy to remember those. Tariff is a tax. They both start with T. Quota is a limit. It limits the amount that comes into the country. And an embargo is a ban. So let's move on to Australia's economic system. So we went over all of these different parts of the economy. Now let's focus more on Australia specifically. So if you look at this on the screen, you'll see the continuum line that we talked about before, where pure command is on one side, pure market is on the other, and mixed is in the middle. So you'll see that Australia is closer to that market side. They are 83% market. They are a very, very free country. Those buyers and sellers make a lot of those decisions. So Australia is the 4th freest country in the world. It has very minimal government regulation. The government is still there. They still make those safety precautions, those health hazards, things like that, but they don't really get in the way of those buyers and sellers. The buyers determine what they want, or the sellers determine what they want to sell, how much they want to sell it for, and it's mostly based on supply and demand. And then they have a mixed economy, but it does float closer to that market side. If you look back at that continuum line, it does float closer to the market side. So literacy rate and standard of living. Australia has a literacy rate of 99%. That is very, very good. Australia is very, very focused on their education. They make sure that the children are required to go to school from ages 6 to 18. And then they also have certain pathways for those students to go into when they hit high school, when they hit that high school age. They're able to go into the college pathway or the trade pathway, whatever they want to do when they get older. They have certain pathways that they go into, so they focus more on those education requirements. That high literacy rate gives that country a very, very high standard of living. The people there have very good access to those luxury items, the things that you don't really need, but you just want. They also have a highly trained and educated workforce. They put a lot of their power into making sure that their people and their workers are trained, that they have the best training when it comes to certain machinery or making something or their services. And they also make sure that they're very, very highly educated. Australia's GDP, their gross domestic product, ranks 12th highest in the world. That is very, very high. That's very, very good. And that's really due to that standard of living and the literacy rate. Australia also continually invests in its economy by upgrading those machineries and those factories to make it easier for those people, those workers, to get the job done more efficiently. So another pop quiz. You know how this goes. I'll read the question. I'll give you 5 seconds, and then you'll answer the question. So number 1, what is Australia's economic system? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. If you said a mixed economy, closer to the market side, you got it right. Number 2, what are the 3 original economic systems? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So the 3 original economic systems are market economy, traditional economy, and command economy. The mixed economy is not part of those original economic systems. And then number 3, what is literacy rate? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So the literacy rate is the number of people in a country over the age of 15 who can read and write. Okay, so that is it. I hope you learned a whole bunch about government and economics and how Australia conducts their economic system and their government. Until next time, I'll see you later. Bye.